This is a review of finding velocity final for a projectile as it strikes the ground. And as we talked about before, when the projectile strikes the ground, we can make that the origin of an x and y coordinate system. So you have velocity final in the x going off to the right, and you have velocity final in the y going down. So we're going to make our velocity final in the x equal to 20 meters per second, which you would have calculated at the beginning of the problem, since velocity in the x does not change. And velocity final in the y, we are going to make 30 meters per second, which you also would have already calculated. This is our final angle here. Now, when you add vectors, you add them head to tail, and I want you to always take the one that's on the y-axis, slide it over, so its tail is on the head of the vector for the x-axis, or velocity in the x. So I take the y one, I slide it over, and my answer is from the tail of the one to the head of the other. So here is my angle, and this is going to be my velocity final to hypotenuse this right triangle, and now my velocity final on the y is over here. So as we talked about in class and showed you, we use good old Pythagoras, my friend and yours, in order to do this. So rewriting the Pythagorean theorem in terms of velocities, you have velocity final equals velocity final in the x, that entire term squared, plus velocity final in the y, that entire term squared, and the square root of it. Make sure everything's inside the square root. So let's calculate our speed as we strike the ground. So we will have, in the x direction was 20 meters per second. The entire thing is squared. And then we have 30 meters per second. That entire thing is squared. Make sure it's all inside the radical. And do not put a negative in front of this, because the angle is what will give us our direction. So the speed part of the velocity is 36.06 meters per second. Now let's do the angle. So we use the inverse function for tangent, which is arctangent. You can also write that as tangent to -1. That's fine. The -1 signifies that is the inverse function of tangent. So we have velocity final in the y over velocity final in the x. Oh well, good enough x. Make sure you use the absolute values when you do this, and then you look at your picture and you tell whether it's above or below the x-axis. Okay, so I have 30 meters per second. That was my final speed portion in the x and the y, and my final part of the velocity or speed in the x direction was 20. So the angle at which the projectile strikes the ground is 56.31 degrees. So you put that together with the speed, 36.06 meters per second, and you have the final velocity of the projectile.